Welcome to today's spine-chilling episode. Have you ever been home alone and felt that unsettling feeling that something just isn't right? You're not alone. In this video, we're counting down the 5 scariest things that can happen when you're by yourself at home. So, turn off the lights, grab a blanket, and get ready to be thoroughly creeped out. Let's dive in. One evening, my dog, who sadly passed away this year, used to like standing on the stairs and looking out the window to watch the world go by. One evening, my parents went out, and my dog was in his usual spot when I heard a very low growl. I come out of my room to see him, and he growls again and shifts slightly, but he's focused on the window and he doesn't budge. His heckles are up, and his body language is stiff. I'm thinking it's a fox or cat that's triggered him, but I'm concerned as it was the first time I had ever heard him growl. I take a look out of a different window, and I can't see anything. I knew enough not to try to move any dog on while in that state, a risk of dogs redirecting, etc. So I left him to it, and eventually he comes and settles outside my room after pacing along the hallway for a bit, but he won't come into my room when I call him. He's just fixed in my doorway. After an hour, a police helicopter flies over and circles around the area, but that's normal for that part of town, and I don't make a connection. I just figure something has spooked my boy. The next day, around the afternoon, we got a knock on the door from the police. The evening before, a young girl got followed off a bus and assaulted on a nearby green, and the dirty bastard ran off and hid in people's gardens after he was done. He had tried a few people's doors and windows to see if they were open, and the police wanted to know if we'd seen anything unusual that evening. My dad answered in the negative as he was out with my mom. However, I wasn't in when the police knocked and only heard about it later when my dad told me about the police. The guy was eventually caught and charged as they traced the card he used to board the bus he followed the girl off of. It wasn't his first offense either. It was all over the local news. I suspect the guy was hiding in our garden and my dog had spotted him. I knew the guy was dodgy, so I went into guard dog mode, which was unusual as he was a big, soppy baby who loved everyone. I miss him. This happened about 1.5 years ago. My family lives in a house with some acreage down a long gravel driveway. We have a big yard, and the property is lined with trees. One night, I was out with my boyfriend, my parents, my sister, and her boyfriend. My boyfriend and I were living at my parents' house at the time, but we drove separately to go out. My parents had to make a stop on the way home, so I knew they'd probably be home about half an hour after us. BF and I got home around 11 p.m. After going inside, I headed upstairs to change, and my boyfriend went to the downstairs bathroom. Within minutes of us arriving home, the doorbell rang. Like I said, we lived down a long gravel driveway, kind of out in the country, so it was very unusual to get unexpected visitors even during the day, but this was around 11 p.m. I had a bad feeling about it, so I yelled downstairs to my boyfriend and told him not to answer the door and not to walk in front of it because there's a window right next to it. We both stayed frozen where we were and tried to think of who it could be. I looked out an upstairs window to try to see the car in the driveway, but it was parked too far over, so it was blocked from my view. I could only see that its lights were still on. After about 5-7 minutes, we heard the person walk back to their car, get in, and drive away. My BF ran to the window next to the door to see the car as it drove away and said it was a black or dark-colored minivan. We don't know of anyone who drives a dark-colored minivan. I called my parents to ask if they might know who this could have been, but they said they had no idea. We all thought if it was someone we knew, they would have called or texted us. It was also strange that this person showed up within minutes of my boyfriend and me arriving home. The only explanation I can think of is that it could have been a lost pizza delivery driver, and the timing was a coincidence. BF said there was no logo on the car, and also that 11 p.m. is a little late in our area for pizza delivery. Since we live out in the country, most places close around 9 p.m. At the time, we had never considered a doorbell camera since we have so few visitors, but I bought my dad one a few months later. We never found out who it was. Before I went to bed, I brought the dogs in, locked every door and window, and turned off every inside light. I was staying up, playing on my laptop, when I thought I heard the front door open. I could see the living room from my bedroom, so I peeked out and noticed that the computer screen was on. The only way it could be on was if the keyboard was touched or the mouse had been moved. And I saw nobody. I felt spooked, so I grabbed the pistol my dad left for me and walked through the house, loudly calling out that I wouldn't hesitate to shoot. I probably would have. I was shaking with fear. I checked the whole house, turned on every light, grabbed the dogs, double-checked the locks. They were still locked. Ran into my room, locked my door, and started texting friends in town. Keep in mind that it's like 11 p.m., and most everybody I knew was asleep. In the middle of texting, my door slammed against my doorframe. 3 times. No warning, no prior sounds, just bam, bam, bam. I froze in fear, staring at my door. I know I didn't imagine it because my dogs lifted their heads and ears at my door, but they didn't bark. I called the only person who was responding in hysterics. He did his best to calm me down via phone because he lived 6 hours away, and that was the best he could do. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I called my mom and told her what happened. Was she concerned? No. She got after me for not calling our neighbors for help. Really? It was 11 p.m. We lived in a tiny town of 3,000, and she wasn't worried that there was something in our house? Nothing was stolen, and I lived on the outskirts of town, where the next-door neighbor was a half-mile away. The thing that concerns me is the dogs. They didn't bark once. One was a golden retriever, and the other was a yellow lab. Both would bark at anything unfamiliar and would protect me. They heard the door frame but did nothing. It still spooks me out to think about it 11 years later. I'm 15 at the time and living in a new house built on the family farm in Australia. My parents work shifts, and on this night they are both out, and both of my brothers currently living at home are at separate sleepovers. My room had 2 single beds, in case a guest slept over, with a bedside table between them. On this bedside table was one of those touch lamps that had various brightness settings. Anyway, it's about 11 p.m., and I'm on my laptop in my room, and the lamp starts to flicker. I ignored it for a while, thinking it was just the bulb about to blow. The lamp goes black, and because it's the only light on in my room, the only thing I can see now is the laptop screen. Then the lamp goes on again, and instead of going black and then switching back on like a lamp would with power issues, it goes from bright, mid, dim, and off with like a second between each brightness change. I put my laptop off of my lap and looked at the lamp because, hey, maybe a moth keeps flying into the stand? Nothing. The next thing I remember, I'm standing at the end of the hallway, looking at my room and crying. My mom is home from her shift and is shaking my arm, asking me what's wrong. I'm confused, but it feels like my chest is caving in. My heart is beating like crazy, and my neck and head are all tingly. My mom took me into her room for the rest of the night, and I told her what happened in the morning. She had come home at around 4 a.m. and found me in the hallway, so I don't know what happened in the hours between me in my room and me in the hallway. Anyway, the next day, my older brother offered to swap rooms, and that was that. I never went back into that room during the night, and only if I really needed to during the day. The house and farm were sold a couple of years ago, and I remember when we went to the new house, it was so much better. I haven't had anything like that happen since then. I was sitting on my bed and I was home alone, of course. There was a dog and a cat with me. And mind you, they always stir when something is around the house. The house has cameras around it, and something beeps when motion goes off at any of the cameras. If it's the front camera, it announces it's the front door. My front door is inside a walled-off courtyard with a half-swing gate that I can see from 2 of my windows. If anybody ever walks in that gate, not only do I see them, but I also always hear the gate, which sets off the dog. The only other path to the front door is from a larger gate that leads to the backyard. I can't see it, but it's large and noisy. All the walls are covered in thick vines, and there is no way to quietly climb these walls or gates. So we have cameras, motion sensor alerts, animals, and myself. I'm sitting in my room, and the TV is paused. If you are familiar with doorbells, when you push in, it makes one ding, and when you release the button, it makes your second ding. I'm very familiar with this because I always like to pause for 3 seconds when I ring a friend's doorbell. So I'm sitting there, windows open, and the doorbell rings only once. I immediately freeze, and the second ding never happens. The dog doesn't even look up. At this point, I feel like I imagined it, but I know what I heard for sure. I jump up and go straight to the windows, and within 20 seconds of the bell, I have eyes on the front door. Nothing at all, just one ding. Not to sound cool, but I grab my bat and head out the front door. I scope around and see nothing. I walk up to the doorbell, and it's been pressed in, and it's stuck. The button itself is also buzzing due to it being smashed in. It's literally wedged into itself. Scary? Okay, well, as I'm looking at the bell, it pops out in front of my eyes, and the last ding goes off, and I jump out of my skin. This happened 6 months ago. I'm 29 years old and a male with adequate physical training of sorts. I ran into my room and called 2 people and made them talk to me on the phone for a while. When the homeowners were available to speak to me the next day, I asked them to check the cameras, and they did. They saw nothing. I shut you not. I'm not making this up at all. But they saw nothing on the camera, not even me walking around and investigating. I showed them my call logs and had them check the minutes leading up to my phone calls, and fucking nothing. It's the only experience I've had in my life where I was truly afraid, and it's the most confused I've been. It's actually the first time I've talked about it since it happened, and I am getting massive chills. Who pushed the button? It has a spring in it. What pushed the button?